it completely changed my, I just feel so much better. The anxiety is, I mean, I do have moments, obviously, but
of course,
it's not as debilitating as it was before, nowhere near. And I'm able to kind of come through those periods much quicker.
yeah.
So like if there is any anxiety around, you know, life or work or whatever, it is easier to kind of process that and move through. So
yeah. Hello, Lucy. Thank you for joining me. Very excited to have our conversation on how change changes you. Before we get into talking about all the juicy stuff that we're going to cover today, I would love for you to share with those listening or watching a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
So hi, my name's Lucy Emsley, and I live in the Calder Valley in West Yorkshire, which is a lovely part of the world. And I founded a business called Sow Clever, coming up to 3 years ago, actually. And Sow Clever is a business. We create gardening gift kits for people who've never really grown before. So the kits are really easy to use. They have everything in them except the water, and yeah, they're a really good way for people to grow something who've never really grown before. And we have a website. We sell on a website. Do you want me to tell you the name of that, Christina, or
I think you should. I mean, we're going to include it in the notes below, but please do.
It feels really like I am doing a bit of a sales pitch. I don't mean to, but it's www.sowclever.co.uk. And we also sell via independent retailers, and we have been in some of the bigger retailers like John Lewis and Selfridges. So yeah, that's us really. I mean, the business is just me and my husband, so it's really, really small. We're still in the early stages, really, but yeah, it's been a journey.
Yes. And for those as well, sow is spelled S-O-W, as in sowing the seeds. So clever, which I love the branding, because that's how
I can't even claim it as my own. It was actually somebody else that came up with that. I probably owe them some money, don't I? But
yeah. Well, no, but I love it so much, because what we're going to go on to talk about is, you know, planting seeds of possibility. And I know, you know, you and I have worked together previously in our previous corporate lives in areas of branding. And then I love, because when we were chatting just before we went into recording this, we were like, oh, because this is the second time we've spoken. And I just looked it up, actually. It was the 28th of July, 2020 was when we last had our podcast conversation. But obviously this time is really, well, I suppose that time we covered change, because really this was about you at the time coming out of your corporate role and then starting something brand new. And then how's it 3 years happened? Where's that gone?
COVID's had a lot to answer for, I think.
Yes. Yeah, we just said it's like swallowed up a whole load of time. But what we really, I suppose, we talked about so many different things coming on, but you know, you yourself, haven't you, Lucy, have gone through quite a roller coaster kind of ride over that time.
Yeah.
And one, I mean, I know it's something that's very close to your heart, and you actually, as part of your business, give to a mind charity, don't you, for mental health?
We do.
So could you maybe share with people listening, you know, why that's close to your heart, and maybe we can start there about that change that you've encountered?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, we give a proportion of our net profits, 10% of our net profits, to Mind, the mental health charity, and was always part of the plan, really, in terms of the business, because I myself have experienced issues with mental health. And last time we spoke, I did talk about, you know, the reasons for starting the business. It was partly to do with the fact that I just felt, you know, I needed a change, because actually the job that I was doing was not good for my health. And yeah, so that's kind of where it came from. And there's also a lot of links, obviously, between gardening and good mental health. And again, the business was founded on the back of me enjoying time in the garden and actually seeing a connection between gardening, being in the outdoors, and an improvement in my mental health. So, you know, there's a couple of things there. But yeah, I mean, since we last spoke, the business has grown. We've been through COVID, and I've had some quite challenging times myself. I think possibly partly connected to COVID, but not completely. And I'll go on to talk about that. But yeah, in September 2020, so it was a couple of months after we spoke, I had quite a very dark period, really, where my mental health was badly affected. And yeah, it was a really tough time for me and my family. I mean, I do have a really supportive network of friends and family, so that did help. But kind of what came out of that very, very dark period was some more CBT, because I have had CBT in the past, but a diagnosis of OCD, which I'd never kind of thought about OCD, and nobody had mentioned that perhaps that might be something that I, you know, was suffering from. So that actually was a bit of a light bulb moment, because it made me feel like, yeah, that totally makes sense, actually. And my anxiety that I feel, which is really kind of, my mental health challenges are around anxiety, it's actually brought about by OCD. So so that was, in a way, that was that kind of very difficult period that I went through, and that dark place I went to actually taught me quite a lot about, you know, about myself, and I felt better after knowing that it was OCD, and that's kind of why I felt like I did. So yeah, so that was September 2020, and kind of, I still felt really quite fragile, I suppose, for the next sort of 6 to 8 months, and I still didn't feel 100%, if I'm honest, but I did feel a lot better. But you know, you're kind of doing the do, and you're getting on with life, and you know, you're working on your business, and you know, you think, well, I've got a new business, and there is a lot of like stress and anxiety around that, so maybe that's kind of why I'm feeling like it. But ultimately, I started to think about other things that might be triggering anxiety, and one of the things that I really looked into was the perimenopause, because I'm 47, and although I wasn't having many perimenopausal symptoms, I did wonder whether my anxiety might be driven by hormonal changes, because when I look back at my life, my kind of biggest periods of anxiety, although I didn't really know this at the time, and there were OCD tendencies even then, was around kind of puberty, you know, when hormones are obviously all over the place. After I'd had my son, and I was 35 when I had Isaac, and then obviously kind of 11 years later. And I thought, well, they're the biggest periods of kind of anxiety and OCD tendencies. So could it be connected with my hormones? So, you know, I went down the sort of doctor route and spoke to a few people, was fairly dismissed actually at first by you know, practitioners. But I kind of persisted a little bit, because I was fairly sure that what I actually thought was, it can't hurt. It can't. I know there are some risks with kind of HRT, but that's kind of where I wanted to be. I wanted to try it and see what happened. And so I did. I started on HRT in July 21. Yeah, it completely changed my. I just feel so much better. The anxiety is. I mean, I do have moments, obviously, but
of course,
it's not as debilitating as it was before. Nowhere near, and I'm able to kind of come through those periods much quicker. Yeah. So, like, if there is any anxiety around, you know, life or work or whatever, it is easier to kind of process that and move through. So, so that's kind of where I've been, and where I am now is like, it is like day and night, really, night and day, should I say. Yeah, so
because thank you for sharing that, Lucy. And we just said earlier about the power, right, of being open and honest about this. And I think this is, you know, in I suppose times, and I think especially over the last 2 years, but maybe a little bit more than that, thank goodness, mental health and talking about our mental health is more accepted. It's more, people are more open to talk about it. I think we've still got a long way to go. But I love the example of this being a change, because, you know, we are made of changes. And I think, you know, when you mentioned about hormonal change, you noticed a pattern in yourself whereby, well, hold on, yeah, puberty is a huge hormonal shift, as is having a baby, huge hormonal shift. And then, yeah, when you're in the cycle of your life where you're in perimenopause or menopause, and that is again another shift. And I think, you know, for a lot of us, and I think it's cultural to kind of almost dismiss or to try and fix, as opposed to, this is natural cycles of life. This is kind of, you know, and so it's saddening to hear that you knew yourself that, hold on, I've noticed a pattern. It's got to be something to do with that. And to feel like some health practitioners are just fobbing you off is really quite frustrating. It must have felt frustrating.
It was very frustrating. And actually, it's so common that women who are going through perimenopause or have perimenopausal symptoms don't really feel listened to. And like, there will be loads of great doctors out there that do listen to their patients. I mean, I have a brilliant doctor now in my local surgery who is amazing. But I think there is an issue when doctors, I mean, this is maybe going off on a tangent, but I think that it's an issue when doctors aren't really trained on this, when it affects 50% of the population. So yeah, I mean, I listened to my body and sort of went with my gut instincts that something wasn't right. And I also knew that the level of anxiety that I was still feeling, even though I felt better, a lot better than I had, still wasn't right, because I still felt, you know, I was waking up in the mornings, some mornings, not every morning, but with, you know, maybe a pounding heart and stressing about something. And, you know, that isn't me, as in, it wasn't me. You know, I've had periods in my life, like, I think back to sort of my late teens, 20s, early 30s. I didn't feel like that at all. No. I didn't have this. I didn't feel like this at all. So, you know, it's not something I've had all the way through my life. And that made me think, well, is it something that could be hormone related? But nobody had ever discussed this with me. Nobody had ever said, well, it could be, you know. So whether or not it's because there isn't really a connection, or whether or not, and it's just coincidence, I don't know, or whether or not they're just not trained to think in that way, I don't know. But I basically listened to how I felt and pursued it. I mean, unfortunately, I had to sort of push harder than I really should have done, but I did, and you know, I am in a much better place now.
Yeah, but I think that's important to say, isn't it? Because the two things I took from that is, one, you tuned into yourself, because you know your body, you know how you feel. You know, it's not for another practitioner to fob you off and kind of say, oh no, that's not right. No, I know that this is not normal for me. There's something that's not right. There's something that needs attention. And then also the fact that you were persistent with it and said, you know, no, I want to find out more. And sometimes, right, we need to be a little bit more assertive than perhaps we maybe start out as being, and just show that, no, I need this answer because my health is important.
Yeah, and I think culturally we are trained to defer to doctors because doctors are trained. And we're kind of, you know, we're taught that, you listen to the doctor knows best, you know. And most of the time they do, but sometimes, you know, you've got to be a bit more assertive, as you say, and you know. Yeah. It's difficult. It is, and I'm not a naturally assertive person. I don't know. It's just something that doesn't come easily, but I got to the point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore.
Enough.
Enough is enough. And you know, obviously I did get the result that I needed, and it's worked out well, and so far so good. I feel like so much better. But
so I wanted to speak to, because I mean, I'm assuming, and we should never assume, that everybody's kind of heard of OCD, but obviously it's obsessive compulsive disorder. Could you speak a little bit to that? And because you just mentioned before that there's a few different types, which I must admit I wasn't really aware of.
Yeah, I think if you did research, you'd find 5 or 7 types of different. Well, it depends where you look, really. But there are different types of OCD, and the most common one that people are aware of is kind of around germs and people, you know, washing hands and cleanliness and hygiene, and that's you know, one that most people are aware of, but mine's slightly different. Mine is more around endangering other people. So for example, when I'm driving, I do struggle sometimes. I worry about, you know, have I pulled out of that junction too quickly, or, you know, have I endangered somebody or a cyclist or whatever. So, you know, that is the type of OCD that, you know, I have, and it is, yeah, it can be quite debilitating. So yeah, if you're not aware of that, go and have a look and see the different types, because I didn't know that. I thought OCD was about, you know, washing your hands a lot, or, you know, because we're not really taught about it, are we, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, very debilitating, because it does impact on your day-to-day life. Obviously OCD does for everybody, but who has it, but doesn't really matter which kind you've got, it's very debilitating.
You also mentioned as well, when it was diagnosed, that it actually gave you a bit of relief.
Oh yeah, totally did, because it made total sense. Before then, I just had this, you know, I was an anxious person, or, you know, I'd been, it was something that, you know, I just had to kind of live with, and I didn't really understand the meaning, you know, what was causing it. And actually, having had the diagnosis, I felt a lot lighter, because it's my OCD that drives the anxiety. So just being able to have a name for it made me feel so much better. You know, and I suppose going through that really, really tough time and coming out the other side, you know, it is, ill health can be a catalyst for change, you know, and you can feel better, I suppose, is what I'm saying there. But yeah, I just felt so much better just knowing that, you know, I wasn't just an anxious person. There was no sort of like specifics around it. So yeah, much happier knowing what it was, and then being able to do something about it, you know, being able to find ways to manage it.
Because it's almost a scary place, isn't it? And I think it's an important point to highlight, because for a lot of people, I think we can so easily over-identify with a feeling, and then you start to almost like, oh, I am the anxiety, like you almost embody it and kind of go, I am an anxious person, as opposed to, no, I'm a human being who has a side to me, a part of me that has an obsessive compulsive part that is being triggered by something else, because there what you're doing is creating a bit of space between you and the symptoms of what you're experiencing. And I think that space is the relief, I think, that you're talking about, of like, oh my God, thank God I am not going insane, or I'm not broken. Like there's just something that just needs to be looked at.
That's totally right. You know, it is, you just feel a bit broken and a bit weird. That's how I felt. I can't speak for everybody, but, you know, that's how I felt. I just felt like I was a bit weird, and, you know, I was a bit broken, and there was nothing that could be done. And actually, I just felt so much freer knowing that it wasn't.
But it kind of gives you, it must give you power as well, because I think when you don't know what it is, you feel powerless to change it. And to your point, then you're like, oh, I'm just gonna have to live with it. But then the weight of that must be huge.
Yeah, the weight of it is huge, and you do feel so much lighter afterwards. And I think the other thing that's really empowering is, having had that diagnosis, I felt more able to talk about it, because it was like I was empowered because I had more knowledge around it as well. So I knew kind of, you know, what was going on in my own head, and I felt happy to talk about it. And I've been able to talk about it more through my business as well, because obviously there is that connection between, you know, why I started the business, my story, it's on the website, and, you know, our connection with mine. So it's a great platform to be able to share how my journey really with mental health, and actually sharing, I think it was it October? I think it was the October blog, because it was the World Mental Health Day. I wanted to tie in with that, but I think if you have a look at the October blog, I talk about in more detail about, like, you know, my mental health journey, and writing it on the piece of, well, on the keyboard or whatever, and pressing that button felt amazing, because I could share it and I wasn't embarrassed by it, and you know, it felt really empowering, really freeing. However, and I was telling you earlier, the next day I felt a bit weird, because I'd shared this quite deeply emotional and personal stuff with the world, in theory. And I felt very, very vulnerable after doing that. But the responses that I had from people were lovely, you know, so supportive, people I didn't know, people I did know. And yeah, it didn't last long, but somebody put in the comment when I'd written a post on Instagram, they said that they called it they knew somebody who called it a vulnerability hangover. And that is such an amazing way to think about it, because it doesn't last like a hangover. It doesn't last forever. You might feel a bit like that for 24, 48 hours, but yeah, afterwards you just feel this sense of relief, I guess, because it's out there, and it's enabled me to kind of open up to my family more as well. And you know, I talk about it, you know, in less euphemistic terms as well. I'm more direct with people about it. People can ask me about it, and I'm happy to talk about it as well. And I do think the environment, you know, the world we're living in now, where there is so much more kind of openness to talk about mental health, and you know, people are, you know, much more attuned to mental health challenges, and you know, that it goes on everywhere, and especially with COVID, that, you know, it's allowed me to be more open, I think, the kind of culture and environment that we have now.
Yeah, no, I love that so much, Lucy, because, you know, when we were talking earlier, when we over-identify before we maybe know a diagnosis or really understand something at a deeper level, what's going on for us, that it's something doesn't feel right. And so you go through the process of learning what it is and then empowering yourself to then get the help. You know, we talked about the energetics of shame, that shame breeds and grows from hiding and feeling embarrassed by you experience something. And actually everything then that you shared about sharing and being honest was actually the empowerment of taking ownership and then sharing that. So because shame can't survive when you let light in. It only thrives in the dark. And because we are telling ourselves a story that we should be embarrassed. And actually, I think this is the beauty of us sharing our stories on blogs, on podcasts, you know, in articles, whatever, in conversations in the street, just to normalize that, you know, somebody said to me the other day, you can't kind of fix your mental health, right? Because mental health has a journey. We have our low points, as it is like nighttime, and then we have our high points daytime. Both need to coexist for us to evolve. And I don't know where we got this idea from that we should totally just always reach for this, because it's not possible. And I think this is where we are learning to embrace more the roller coaster ride, to kind of go, yeah, you know what, I was down there and now I'm here. And I'm, you know, we spoke about earlier, didn't we? And like, I might be down there again.
Yeah. And I think that is what this has taught me, this really dark period, is that if I am down there again, then there is an inbuilt sort of resilience in my, that I didn't know I had, that I can be okay. Because at that time, I didn't know that I was going to be okay. But having, you know, back, I mean, in September when it actually happened, I didn't know that I was going to be okay. I couldn't say for certain I was going to be okay, because I felt really, really bad.
Yes.
But now, having been through that, if it does happen again, and I say in my blog, my mental health will never be fixed, because I'm a big believer that you just don't know. And you don't know what's going to happen. You know, you could have periods of, you know, we're all going to face periods of stress and, you know, sadness and loss and grief, and you don't know what that can trigger. But, you know, I know that if that does happen, then there is something inside of me, there is a self-reliance and a resilience that I can get through that again, which, you know, gives me confidence and hope for the future, obviously, you know, because I'm not as worried. I was so fearful. I was so fearful of my anxiety.
Yeah.
and it's never going to go away, but whereas my fear level was like here, it's now kind of much lower. And I think that's because I've been able to kind of come out of a really challenging period. So yeah, there was something else I was going to say and I can't remember what it was, but I'm sure we'll come to it.
Well, you mentioned that obviously one of the things that you then went on to have is HRT, and that's kind of really helped almost reset maybe something that was underlying that just needed some recalibration. So it just goes to show that actually that has brought it back under control for you.
Yeah, it has. Well, I can't think what else it would be, because that's the only thing that's changed really in my life. And yeah, it's completely changed. I just feel back to being me. And a lot of people say this actually when they go on HRT. It's like they've been through some really, really difficult years and they've tried to live with it and they've tried to manage it, and eventually they sort of managed to get heard by a doctor, and they decide to take HRT, because as I said, it's not without its risks, but which are well documented, and the doctor would go through that with you. But once you've kind of made that decision, and then you hear them say, oh, just felt so amazing after. Not everybody, but a lot of women do. They're like, oh God, it was the best thing. So yeah, it's completely changed my life, I have to say. And we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes from here, I guess.
Scream if you want to go faster. No, because we also touched upon along that side, right? Because we've both talked about this in our personal stories, as to having really strong coping mechanisms. Because to your point, I think it's inbuilt in a lot of us to just keep going. Even if you know that something's wrong, you just keep slogging your guts out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's the other thing that I've taught, as I've taught myself really, or the situation that I was in has taught me, is to be so much kinder and gentle with myself than I was before. You knew me, Christina, when I was working in, a fairly corporate job, and it was hectic, it was really busy, and I was really harsh on myself. I'd never give myself a break. I'd always think that I wasn't doing enough, or I'd done something wrong, or hadn't handled that situation properly, or and I've learned through the experience that I've had, and also the situation that I'm in now, in that I own my own business, so ultimately I'm my own boss, but I am much kinder to myself. And I was telling you, in January this year, January is an awful month for a lot of people, and yeah, it's not great, is it? Because of weather and funds, and Christmas is done, and yeah, it's all a bit bleak. So I just made the decision that I was going to be a bit kind and not work quite so many hours as I would have done normally. And yeah, that's something that I would never have done before. But now I just think, what, I need to prioritize my health up here. My work is very important to me as well, but my health has to be at least on a par with it, because otherwise one doesn't work without the other, So yeah, that's something that's and that's okay. It's fine to be kind to yourself. It's not being, I think people put, I don't know what people think when they hear me say that, but it's so important that we look after our health above other things. It's like that thing, the saying that you're totally replaceable at work, but you're not replaceable at home, and that's what it comes down to, essentially.
Yeah, it's so true. And we were talking about this earlier, as two people who previously had a lot of stress as an employed person. And what you said totally resonated. Of when I look back and think, wow, you were really not kind to yourself. I totally identify with that, of just this incessant gotta do more, gotta be more, gotta have more, gotta all of the mores, and you just think, oh my, and unfortunately it's a real shame that most of us have got to crash into a big wall to learn the lesson, maybe a few walls over the time to repeatedly learn the lesson until you heed it. But I think that's why it's important for us to share that story, so hopefully somebody hears us and goes, oh, I think I might be nearing that wall. What can I do to prevent crashing into it?
I mean, I think it is more difficult when you are an employee. I am very aware that I am in a kind of a different situation and a more flexible situation than somebody who is employed. But I think it's about finding ways to be kind to yourself, you know, whether that's taking a break, you know, going for a walk at lunchtime, or, you know, just because, I mean, how many people take lunch breaks? I don't know what industries people work in, but you know, in my job, lunch breaks were luxury, really. So that might be something you can do more of, or perhaps just sitting in the garden having a cup of tea, or snuggling under a blanket and reading a book. Just do something that's nice for you. Slow down. You know, I used to live my life at 100 miles an hour, and you can't do that forever, because you end up
it's not sustainable,
burning yourself out.
A coach who I used to go see said something to me that really hit home a while ago, and she said sometimes you've got to slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
And that is just, and one thing I repeat to myself, I repeat to my sister, I repeat it to lots of people, which is you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If you've got no real energy and you haven't invested in yourself and being kind to yourself and look after yourself on lots of different levels, from sleep to nutrition to exercise to just doing, to your point, simple things that actually bring you a sense of joy. If you're not doing that, if you're not giving yourself permission to ever do that, then know that you are on a track for burnout. It will come get you.
Yeah, you can't sustain it. You just can't.
No.
And unfortunately, as to your point earlier, most people have to reach that before they actually realize that, you know, that you reach that sort of bottom, and then you know, have to slowly build yourself back up again.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, obviously now in my capacity as a coach, I look back at when I managed teams and all the rest of it. And we were just saying earlier about the importance. And I think for anyone listening that manages a team or is around other people, right? It might not even be in a profession where you're managing. If you notice that somebody is struggling or pretending to be okay, then even just, you know, kind of reaching out to them to say, are you okay? And, you know, almost just kind of, I guess, normalizing that if you're struggling, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It means that you just need to take some time out and recharge. You know, we plug our phones in every night, for God's sake.
I know, yeah,
You know
that's
what I mean?
true. That is true. Yeah, I think we're all sort of fearful of, I don't know, I struggled with failure, and I am a real sort of perfectionist, and that drives, or has driven me in my previous roles, just to burn myself out completely. So yeah, I think if you're in that position of responsibility, it's up to everybody to look out for each other. You know, everyone's saying be kind, but you know, that's just as much in a work environment as it is, in fact, even more so. You know, you need to really look after each other, particularly after what we've had to deal with in the last couple of years.
I've come up with that. It's now a phrase that is now embedded in my vocabulary, but I help people say, you know, instead of being hard on yourself, which is essentially judging, you know, right from wrong, good from bad. So it's kind of turn the volume down on judgment and turn the volume up on being compassionately curious. So rather than like, it's more the other way of like, I wonder why, you know, that person's just snapped at me, or I would like, there's a reason why. So actually be curious, but be compassionate with that curiosity, because often we have signals all over the place and much in our bodies, but much people's behavior actually is often a cry for help.
Yeah, it is. And you see that all the time in the workplace. And most of the time they just get dismissed, or somebody would get dismissed as, I don't know, they're stressed. But you need to kind of dig deeper than that, I guess, is what we're saying. And
it's to ask the question. Yeah, totally. It's funny. I watched an interview recently with Will Smith about his autobiography. I think it was an interview with Jay Shetty that he did, but he said something that really resonated. And it's like, people who need the most love ask for it in the most ridiculous ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's the polarity of, you know, and you see it right from being children that act out right the way through to actually adults acting out, because anger, generally speaking, underneath that anger is fear. And it's a need not getting met. So that is a clear signal. So as quickly as we could judge someone as being an angry person, what about you if you really saw that, I wonder if that person's hurting? Because that changes it totally.
Yeah, totally does. And I think, you know, employers need to embrace more of this thinking. And we have got a long way to go in that respect, I think.
Yeah, it's changing. It is changing. But I think, to your point, it is about, we don't get taught this stuff in school. We just don't.
You only really start to understand this as you get a bit older, I have to say. And there is a, you know, when you've been through a bit of life, then these things become more kind of obvious to you, and you can understand them a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, because we also talked about around being kinder to yourself, and there's a I think that we get taught very early on culturally, which is that you want to have something, and then you've got to do the thing to be the thing. And I think it's that reverse engineering that we have to learn to do, to say it's about being who we want to be, or the being part, which is, am I filling my cup up first? Am I doing what's right by me? Am I, you know, being kind to myself? Am I nourishing myself? Am I doing stuff? Because all of that associates selfishness, and it's not actually, because in my experience, when you please yourself, i.e. when you are nurturing of yourself, everyone benefits around you.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, no, that's totally right. And there is a guilt around, you know, taking time for you. Totally resonates with me, that. But, you know, I also recognize, as you've just said, that actually, if I don't take that time for me, and I do carry on just doing the do and working at 100 miles an hour, then my family suffers, and I don't want that, obviously. So I'd rather be more nurturing of myself. It's like putting this is one of yours, isn't it? Putting your mask on, is it?
Yes, I can't claim ownership to it. I think I probably nicked it off somebody else, but yes, put your oxygen mask on first.
That's it.
On the plane.
Yeah, totally true though, isn't it? Like, you put your own mask on and then you can help others. But yeah, so it totally resonates, because it does feel a bit funny at first as well. Like, you can feel you do feel selfish, but it's not selfishness. It is just being compassionate with yourself. And I'm so much more open to that now than I was when I, you know, was in my sort of 20s and 30s, and as a young mum. I was so like hard on myself as not a young mum, a mum of a young child. I was not a young mum, 35. I was so hard on myself, and I did so much comparing and judging of my abilities to other people, which was just ridiculous, but probably a lot to do with my own mental health. But at the time, I didn't really realize that. I do probably think I had a bit of postnatal depression, but it was never diagnosed. So yeah, it's so easy to compare yourself, and actually it's pointless, absolutely pointless. But yeah, at the time you do. So
you do. Well, I suppose you're trying to figure it all out, and I think that's all we're ever trying to do. And the more people I work with in a coaching perspective, it further gives me evidence of, I've not met one person who has like cracked life. Like, we just don't. And I think I often, talk about the analogy of, you learn to ride the waves of life, because it's normalizing that there will be times where you will hit a really sticky point, but it doesn't have to mean the end. And I think the more we resist that very fact that it's going to be potentially a bit heart-wrenching, that's really, one of the reasons why obviously we're having this very conversation, and why I created this podcast, is to normalize the fact that, well, it's like, the winter part of our soul, right? It's the breaking down of, and I know I before spoke about, somebody recently was talking about the old analogy about the caterpillar and the butterfly, right, which is the evolution, the metamorphosis. But I hadn't heard this version before when we were talking about the dark night of the soul, because you think of, oh yeah, you know, the caterpillar is the caterpillar, and then it goes in the chrysalis, and then it becomes a butterfly. Actually, there's a bit in between that when it goes in the chrysalis, there's a point, apparently, I mean, I'm no biologist, but this is just what somebody said, that you actually compose in a way, and that's not very pleasant to think about, but it's like a breaking down of into this kind of caterpillar goop, for that's technical term, the biological term, caterpillar goop.
Well, I love that analogy, Christina, because I can absolutely relate to that. You know, I have been in the goop. I have been the goop. I'm not sure how to say it, but yeah, I've been the goop. And yeah, it's kind of at those darkest moments you realize that, you know, when you come out of it, God, you've come so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, again, it's like it's a catalyst. You know, going through the goop stage is actually the catalyst for brighter days, you know.
Yeah, and you can't shortcut it. I think that's the other thing that I blame in culture, that everyone's looking for the life hack. Give me the life hack. No, there's kind of no hack, unfortunately. Like, you've kind of got to, that's why they call it a rite of passage, or the dark night of the soul, because you just mentioned something there. When you are feeling like the goop, and I can remember I felt like goop a few times, but one of, you know, my change story, for those who haven't caught it, was the first episode when my relationship ended, and then I questioned everything in my life. There was a strong full 2 weeks I felt like goop. But I think it's at that point that you surrender fully to everything. You let go of everything that is no longer serving you. And it's ironic that once you do that, then life just floods in and picks you up. And that's at the point you start getting stronger.
I love that. I love that. I really love that analogy. I think it totally fits with the challenge that I went through. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm a beautiful butterfly by any stretch. You are. But, you know, I am definitely more aware that, you know, that terrible low can be followed by, you know, lovely brighter days, you know, ahead, and lots of hope and fun times. And you know, I have to give thanks to my friends and family for helping me through it as well, because you know, their support has been amazing. So yeah.
No, you know, I think it's so important. I think that's, you know, one of my pieces of my mission, I guess, is to, if you're in goop now, or you think you might be nearing being the goop stage, if you're nearing the goop stage, know that it's part of the process. You're not broken. You're actually steps away from feeling so much better. But it's that's kind of the path a lot of the time. So I guess if Lucy and I can do nothing other than to give you plant a seed of hope, then that's definitely what we're here to do. So just to kind of, I suppose, to bring this beautiful conversation to a bit of a close, Lucy, how these changes that you've experienced along the way, how would you summarize how it's influenced how you live your life today?
So I'm definitely less fearful of change. So I spoke to you beforehand around, you know, we are all programmed to sort of fear change because it's about self-preservation, but actually the worst change in the world can actually be a great catalyst, you know, a catalyst for sort of great change and great things ahead. So not to be so worried about it. You know, I'm a bit more sort of, let's just see what happens, maybe a bit more fatalistic, I suppose. It's like, you know, trust, I don't know how you'd put it, you know, I sort of trust in that the universe is going to look out for me a little bit. I'm a bit more like that. But I think because I'm less fearful of change, I'm open to more embracing different challenges as well. So, things that perhaps I might not have wanted to do in the past, I will have a go at now. I'm thinking more professionally than personally. But I think what it's done is built quite a lot of self-reliance and confidence. I am more decisive as well. So, I sort of don't, I do still sweat the small stuff a little bit, because I think we all do.
Yeah.
But I sort of trust a little bit more in myself, which makes me more decisive. So, if I want to do something with the business, I'll just go ahead and do it. And that's really empowering, because ultimately, if it doesn't work, it's only me that it affects, and my husband. But so I guess resilience, self-belief, self-confidence, all those great things. That's kind of where what it's kind of done for me, and how it affects my life day to day now is just a more resilient person.
I'm also getting a sense of ease. There's a greater sense of ease, and there's not that kind of,
I'm less bothered about I'm less, obviously I want my business to be a success, don't get me
yes,
wrong,
of course.
But I'm not going to make myself ill over it. I'm placing my mental health firmly at the same level, maybe even a bit higher. It's in some months like January, when I'm kind to myself, I'm definitely, putting that alongside my business, and not making my business my priority. It's a mixture, obviously, of the both. And I think that's the beauty of my business, is that because we are so, we talk a lot about mental health, and mental health is a big part of why we started the business. It's lovely for me, because it's really freeing and empowering, and I can share lots of stuff on that on my website and with my customers that it feels a safe space, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And I realize not everybody's in that position, but
but I think it's inspiring to know. And if people want to go back to a prior episode of sowing the seeds, because you talk about that transition, you went from being employed to being running your own business. I think it's important to see just how far you've come. And I think the other big piece about this that I'm taking from this is that I think it's to know yourself at a deeper level, and to make real, it's on my tip of my tongue to say authentic action, but I mean it, because you've created your life based on what you care about, what you're passionate about, and it matches your lifestyle. And I think that's just so wonderful.
Well, it goes back to, Christina, my core values that we went through right back in the day. So this is before we started the business. So we identified what my core values were, and it totally fits. And I don't know if that's because I've made it fit, I'm not sure, but it fits with my business and my lifestyle, and I feel more authentic and less conflicted, because when I was working in the corporate world, it didn't really, my values weren't aligned with it, so it felt inauthentic, which actually created more stress. So I have less stress and I'm more at ease now, because my values are more aligned to what I'm doing.
Beautiful. But it is, and that's been my personal experience as well. That's why I obviously do this stuff, and that's where authentic action as a name came from, because I was like, oh, you mean if I align my choices with what I care about, like, I can create whatever I want? What? Because it's that light bulb. The light bulb moment.
You feel good. You feel, because it's aligned, you feel good, and you feel like, more at ease with everything. That's the best way to put it.
That's where the fuel comes from, and it's natural occurring fuel, because that's something that you care about. So then it doesn't feel like work. I think that's the other thing, because it just feels like this feels right in my soul.
Yeah, and that's totally right with my business. Well, there are some things that feel like when you're looking at spreadsheets and financials, clearly. But there are other things where it's like, God, this is just great. This is the stuff I love to do. And, it doesn't feel like work. It feels just like, you know, I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that, doing a job that you enjoy?
No, are you allowed? Yes, you are. But just for you reflecting on the fact that you created that. And I think that's the thing. And I would say to people that maybe are going, values, what are those? Or like, you know, what do you mean? I think it's back to investing in yourself. Are you getting clear on, okay, what energizes you, what lights you up, but also contrastingly, what feels heavy and what drags you down? Because the ratio there and the formula is get rid of the stuff that feels heavy and do more of the stuff that lights you up. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but essentially that's the nugget.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, having those sessions with you 3 years ago set me on that path. And this isn't me going, you know, I mean, you know, I love you, but, you know, I just wanted to share that, because without your support, I don't know that I would have set off on the right path. So I thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll pay you later.
No, that's why I was like, I don't know whether
I love that. I love that. And look, you know, I think at the end of the day, yes, you know, obviously we're running businesses and all the rest of it, but we are both passion led, i.e., you know, I've 100% found my vocation in life, and you have too. And I think that's where the passion comes from. And God, I mean, you've just filled my cup runneth over, because that's what I'm here. That's, you know, yeah, you know, if money wasn't a thing, I would just do this anyway. I just kind of would, because I think that's the key. And I think it's back to what you said before, which is there also about Sow Clever, is that you know that this has made such a difference in your life, just around getting into nature and going and gardening and growing, you know, and seeing that and appreciating that. You know how much joy it's brought you, and so you want to share that with others. And I think that's the beauty of all of this. And it's back to that thing of, when you're selfish, it feels like you are abandoning yourself for the sake of another. But actually, when you fill up your own cup, then you can't help but want to share that joy and happiness and good stuff with everybody else. So it's kind of goes without saying that you need to be filling your cup up regularly, and then everyone will benefit.
Yeah, totally.
So, well, I have loved this conversation. So thank you, Lucy. We'll make sure that we drop in all of the links to your website. You are on Instagram as well, aren't you? You mentioned.
We are Instagram, Facebook. I'm actually on what's the one that the kids go on?
Oh, TikTok.
I can't remember its name.
It's more than, well, apparently it's going off the charts, more than just the kids. I think all of the other ages are joining.
They are. I mean, it's just that everyone laughs when I say I'm on, like, TikTok. What are you doing on TikTok? But I'm doing something on TikTok, which is it's more around it's more sort of business focused and it's about, you know, it's a little bit of a vlog, I suppose, of like starting your own business and what that's like. So it's not really, you know, it's certainly not selling. No. But yeah, check me out on any of those channels.
Nice.
Yeah. And check out our website, obviously, as well.
Of course. We'll make sure that all the links get included. And I would highly recommend, because Lucy sent me a Sow Clever box, and I still have the beautiful herbs that you gifted me. So that was absolutely amazing. And I loved, I mean, God, that's one of my things that bring me joy, just to cook with fresh herbs every day. It's just a game changer. So
it is. And it is so simple, and everybody can do it with just a bit of support.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, it's great. Well, thank you again. And
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.